Important to remember, things do change. Only 2 of the initial top 4 teams last season ended up making the CFP. Ohio State and LSU were joined by Clemson, which started just outside of the top 4, and Oklahoma, which moved up from the number 9 spot. Fox Sports' Bruce Feldman joins us now to break this down a little bit further. And Bruce, let's start with the Big Ten teams and Ohio State. They're 4th. They're 3rd in the AP, so they're a spot below where the voters have them. They still clearly, in my mind, would control their own destiny. What do you think about Ohio State being where they are?
I think it's about right. Look, they beat a good team this weekend, Indiana, but Justin Fields was shaky, three picks, and also they gave up a bunch of plays. Their secondary does not look elite, let's say that. And also, I think you can see there's no dominant Chase Young, there's no Bosa up there. I think their front 4 isn't what we expect it to be. But having said that, I still think they're one of the best 4 teams in the country. They've done nothing to really make me think that they don't belong in a playoff. Now they got to handle their business. And I think if they run the table, and that presumably could include a win over an undefeated Northwestern team at the end, nobody's leapfrogging Ohio State. And all that matters really is you get into the Final Four. And I think for all the talk about, well, they're starting on October 24th and this and that, I think the committee knows this is a really talented team. And I think they're going to respect it now, look, I don't think they have much margin for error. I don't know if they have any margin for error, but I think at this point, they're in a really good spot.
What about Northwestern at number 8? Feels to me like it's the same story. If they win out, which would likely include a win over Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game, it seems like they would find themselves in the playoff. Anything short of that, and they're not. Do you think they were treated fairly?
I do. You look at this team, and they're really good on defense. That was an impressive showing they had, shutting down Wisconsin, forcing a bunch of turnovers. I think we've seen, Peyton Ramsey's been a good addition. Mike Bajakian's been a really good addition on the offensive side of the ball. So I think those are positives. And if they do get an undefeated Ohio State team in the title game, and they're both undefeated, they win that game, that would be a huge statement. I would put that up with anything, assuming it's a full, it's not a depleted due COVID issues team. That would be as impressive as anybody else's win so far this season. So I think they're in a good spot. And also, if you're Pat Fitzgerald, I think there's something where he could probably tell the team, you know what? Hey, they ranked us behind a group of 5 team. They still don't believe in you. And so he can kind of play that card, yet they're still in a really good spot because they're going to leapfrog those. There won't be a team in there won't be 3 teams in the SEC above them. There can't be if they're undefeated.
Finally, I feel like this day is a day when all of us in the college football media see these first rankings and then come up with our list of grievances that we air. So I would ask you to unfurl your list right now and share with us the things that jumped out at you as being somehow unjust.
Right off the top, what is Georgia doing in the top 10? I don't understand it. They had a loss by 16, then they had another loss by 17 points. But those aren't even the worst parts of it. They just played a Mississippi State team that is awful, and it's awful at full strength. This Mississippi State team only had 49 scholarship players. They went to Athens, and Georgia barely survived against them. So what are we putting them in the top 10 for? I don't know what eye test this is. The only eye test I could see the committee using for a justification to have Georgia in the top 10 is if they looked at the recruiting rankings for the last 4 years and saw a bunch of 4- and 5-star guys. Because other than that, I don't think there's any justification for them being even in the top 15. And if I'm BYU at 14 and I'm looking at it going, hey, we've been really impressive. We have a Heisman caliber quarterback. It's not our fault that we can't get other teams on the schedule. We tried to schedule Power 5 teams, and then everything happened with the pandemic, and they're sitting back at 14, and they whooped a Boise State team. It wasn't even close in Boise, and then the committee kind of picks it apart and goes, yeah, but they were injuries and they were playing their 3rd-string quarterback. I mean, I don't know. There's nothing fair about the system, but to me, that's a little bit sketchy.
Bruce Feldman, thanks for your insights. We'll look forward to catching up with you each week as the CFP rankings are released.
Thank you, Dave.
Fellas, interested in both of your takes, I guess mostly as it relates to the Big Ten. Howard, what stood out to you?
Well, I think you start with Wisconsin at 2-1. Clearly have a lot of love as far as the CFP is concerned because, yes, they had two dominant victories early, but the last loss to Northwestern, obviously a really good team, but the two wins they had were against teams that are shaky at this particular point. Indiana's in an interesting spot as well where they fall. And Northwestern, to me, Northwestern is a great story to keep an eye on because they, in my mind, can control their destiny. Ohio State is a team that could still be undefeated before they get to the championship game. But if they continue to play the way they played last week, I see that team continuing to slide backwards.
I've lost confidence in this committee process the last 2 or 3 years, and I just lost confidence in this year's committee. And here's why. If you look at Indiana and Northwestern, yes, Northwestern's undefeated, but I think the whole group, the whole work of Indiana, when you look at them offensively and defensively, the difference, they're both good defenses. Northwestern's a little better defense. Indiana's a good defense, but Indiana's so much more explosive on offense. I think if you match them up on paper, Indiana wins. Now, I don't know who wins the game if they play one another, but if you're just looking at tape, I think Indiana would be ranked ahead of Northwestern. Wisconsin and Iowa, if you watch the most recent games, and they say they watch tape, in fact, they say this year watching tape is more important than ever because everyone's playing a different number of games. Right now, Iowa is playing better than Wisconsin, in my opinion. And so for those reasons, I don't have a lot of confidence that this committee, with all the pressure on them, can pick out the best teams. For Georgia to have 2 losses and be ranked in the top 10 without even seeing Georgia means that because Northwestern's undefeated and Indiana has 1 loss, that's not a reason to rank Northwestern ahead of Indiana. So I'm out on these guys.
Let me quickly mention Clemson, because they have not been a dominant team. They haven't performed at that type of level that they were last year. This team is not as good as they've been in the past.
And Howard, and I feel the same way about Ohio State. I have no problem with Ohio State being 4. I think that's probably fair. Without seeing the 3 above them, you can still see Ohio State and say, they can play better. So moving down Ohio State doesn't bother me. It's the other 4 that bother me in the Big Ten.
They must not have watched the Clemson-Boston College. That one may have slid by them because they certainly weren't dominant in that one.